Hello, everyone, and welcome to the October 14th episode of the LGS Pod, the Soccer Shorts companion podcast where we highlight topics that affect local grassroots soccer culture here in our hometown of San Diego, as well as across the US and around the world. I'm John Cross. I'm the founder of Soccer Shorts, and with me tonight, as always, is our co-host, Dylan Wilson. Dylan, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. It's been kind of a cold, rainy day. And I don't know, maybe this belies my non-nativeness to San Diego, but I actually really like days like this, and I kind of miss having these a little more often. So I've really enjoyed today, anyway.
It's always nice to get the rain because we don't always get as much rain as we'd like in San Diego. In terms of, water, the all important water that we need. It's nice having the sunny days, but I agree with you. Every once in a while, it is nice to have some of these overcast, rainy days. First rain we've had, like decent amount of rain in quite a while. I can't remember how long, but it's at least where I am, we haven't really had any rain for many months.
Yeah, same. So it was nice, nice change of pace.
It was great to see you. We actually got together here over the weekend. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes when we get to our Open Cup segment because we went out and watched a local round two of the qualifying tournament for the 2026 US Open Cup. So, like I said, we'll get to that in a few minutes. But tonight, our big topic is going to be looking at soccer in Australia because right now, Australian soccer is a bit in the news. If you follow more in depth with what's going on in soccer, because the Australian Championship, their new national second division on their men's side, kicked off this last weekend. The A-League men kick off this coming weekend. The women, in a couple more weeks, kick off their season. And right now, as we record live on this Tuesday evening, the U.S. men's national team is playing Australia. So we thought this was a perfect opportunity to do a deeper dive into the structure of soccer in Australia and see how a country that is large, like ours, has tackled and tried to implement a more traditional soccer pyramid. So we'll look at that in a few.
I'm sorry, I was just going to say a country that's not just large like ours, but that is large in almost exactly the same capacity that ours is. It's about 3,000 miles from coast to coast, except the middle of Australia is way emptier than any part of the Central Plains or the Colorado Plateau. And, there's some wide open space there, and the outback kind of puts that in to make it look small. So, I think it's a really good comparison on that geographic front because it is almost exactly the same size as the contiguous United States.
Yeah, we'll get into some additional details and comparisons in terms of country geography when we get to that segment. But as we always do, kind of to kick off, or we'll hit some lower league and some cup news and some actual San Diego news this time around as well. But we'll kick it off as we usually do with current events. And Dylan, I have to tell you, it was, at least in what I follow, it was a crazy week of news this last week. Way too many things for us to cover. So we're going to streamline it way down. In fact, we're not really going to talk about World Cup tickets or anything else or some of the other stuff that makes the news. We'll do one thing here in a second that came up today that I don't know if you saw, but I'm going to kick it off with something we talked about over the weekend that's still making the rounds, but this idea of Major League Soccer using AI for its match reports on its website, basically. So what are your thoughts about this?
I had not seen that, but I recall you mentioned that this weekend when we were at the Open Cup game. So, yeah, I mean, I guess I can't say I'm surprised. I would say that is like pretty typical MLS, right? Like it's something they can reasonably claim is putting them on the cutting edge of innovation or whatever, but in all reality, it's just continuing to centralize power and fewer hands. And Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's pretty lame, but it's not surprising, I guess, would be my punchline.
Yeah, and I would strongly argue in the grassroots sense. Smaller clubs and stuff, I'd absolutely discourage anyone from trying to do this. Find local people who,
Yeah.
have bought into what you're doing, because they will write stuff that connect with your audience so much better than anything AI, at least right now, could ever do. And really, it's like some of these highlights that I see that are AI driven, that are just like there's a goal or something that has been flagged in some way, and they just take like 30 seconds before it and show that, and maybe show like 6 corner kicks. And you get this weird hodgepodge of a game highlight reel that doesn't really give you a sense of what the game was like. They just, you know, took snapshots and then put them all together. It's the same thing with some of these box scores. And, you know, if you're going to have it try to do articles, have a person do it. I mean, serious, I think for any other club out there, this would be the strongest message, is have an actual person do that. Don't go this route unless you don't really care about probably your core audience. And I'm not saying MLS doesn't, but I've certainly, not thrilled with the way they frequently handle their local communities, and especially their diehard fans, the way they're treated. But yeah, I think this is the absolute wrong way to go, unless you're just trying to get the most casual of casual fan to pay attention.
Well, but that is ultimately what they're doing, right? Like
It
that's
is
their
a
market
goal,
model.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it is a market model. Um, Sticking at some grassroots news, we famously, with the San Diego Loyal at the end of the first season, walked off because of a gay slur directed at one of our players. I've been seeing more and more of these reports. I saw an article this week in Outsports how UK Grassroots League had a similar kind of situation happen. Two top teams were in a match, and something happened right at halftime. And then a whole bunch of problems came from that, of red cards and stuff, but not to the person who actually said the slur. And since the ref, in the refs, and I get it, if you're in a referee situation and you don't hear it or you don't see it, there's really not much you can do. Right. But the refs didn't do anything about it. The opposing team didn't do anything about the person. So the team that was the victim of the racial slur and the player, they chose not to participate, walked off the match and took the forfeit. And I don't know how many times I've seen this, but I'm seeing it more and more, of people unwilling to let stuff like this slide. I hear some people make the argument that it's worse than it ever was. I don't think it's worse. I think people are finally starting to call it out more and actually take a stand and do something, which I think is great, because I think ultimately what is going to change the game at the higher level is what happens at the grassroots level. It will work its way up through the system. And I think this is good to see more and more teams taking a stand.
Yeah, agreed. You hope to see that. And I always kind of thought too that, like, well, and I don't know, I guess this kind of gets into the conversation of players feeling comfortable to be their true selves in the sport.
Right.
But it always felt to me like if I knew one of my players or one of my teammates in any game really was like being abused for really anything, it wouldn't really matter what. Um, you'd want to have their back. And so, like, especially when it's something like this, I don't know. I like, on one hand, I know athletes kind of people think of them as a bit of meatheads, and that's like not unfair. But I think that, like, too, it's, I think this is kind of like I said, gets into the discussion of the power of like awareness and, acceptance in society. Is like some people might not even realize what's happening because their teammates don't feel like what's comfortable. They're comfortable being themselves. So it's good to see. I hope it continues. And I wish the leagues and administrative bodies would maybe take a stronger stand against this kind of stuff, but we haven't really seen that so far. And just as you said, the red cards got shown to like everybody except the person who did the thing. That was true in the Colin Martin instance as well.
Right.
I think it was after the fact they changed that, but and this is a true thing in sports. I remember as a kid watching football. It's always been the second person who does the personal foul type thing is the one who
retaliates.
Caught. Right. Yeah. It's the person who retaliates. And so, that's a whole other conversation worth some introspection, but I don't know.
Yeah. Disappointing that it's happening, but I'm encouraged to see, and that it's making news. So more people are seeing this as well, that people are taking a stand and are trying to affect some kind of change. So I think in the long run, that's only going to be good for the sport. It's going to take a while to root some of these problems out. But to switch gears, it's like for another set of problems with this country. Another match that's going on right now as we're recording live is Puerto Rico and Argentina. A match that was originally scheduled to be in Chicago had to be moved because of immigration concerns and the arrest of immigrants and all the stuff that's happening in Chicago right now. So they moved the match down to Florida. Is this a precursor of what we can expect as we get closer to the World Cup? People always talk about they don't want to mix politics in sport or not do this, but this is where what's happening on the outside is directly influencing a match, a friendly, but like this match should have been taking place in Chicago.
Blanket people who say keep politics out of X, Y, Z facet of life are either willfully being obtuse or are like ignorant, because politics is everything. Everything is dictated by politics. Politics is the process by which we shape society. So I don't know, just miss me with that argument, I guess. I'm very tired of it. But I do think this is a precursor. I don't see how it couldn't be. They're going to want to put on the whole fucking thing with this Chicago raids it's like the show of force. They're not really accomplishing anything other than terrorizing people. And that's a key tenet of fascism, right? It's this display of force, regardless of how actual forceful that force is. And they will, and by they, I mean the administration, because I think people throw around the word they without defining who they're talking about. I'm talking about this administration will view this World Cup, something that I think a lot of the people there, well, maybe I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I would guess a lot of your more traditional Republican MAGA people probably are still more generally of the mindset that soccer is a socialist commie sport that isn't American, right? So it's not only can they make this big show of force on the world stage, they get to do it to fuck up the thing that the whole world cares about, except us, ostensibly, right? So I don't know. I just don't see how they don't make a huge spectacle of it. I talked about this a couple of weeks ago. I haven't bothered to follow up on this because there's too much to follow up on everything. But I saw that the Iranian delegation from the FA was denied their visas to come help set up their, training camp or whatever. Yeah. And it's that's just, that's just the beginning.
Right. And to go right along with that, I don't know if you saw today Trump's comments, our authoritarian in chief trying to display power floated the idea about removing, there's so many problems wrong with this, but floating the idea of removing World Cup matches from Boston. One, because he thinks they're in Boston rather than Foxborough, but from Boston because, it's a democratic city and to punish them for whatever, to try to get them in line, but threatened and, in effect said he could call up Gianni on the phone and, we could have them moved. So floated that idea. And not just that, a little bit later said, could probably move the Olympics out of LA as well if necessary. One, for a whole bunch of other logistical reasons, don't see how that would ever be possible. But the fact that you have the leader of the country floating these ideas, just putting them out there like he could, is again that display of power. But just like, how do you possibly make this a successful event that people want to come to when this is the rhetoric 9 months out from the event?
Well, I can tell you what I think Gianni Infantino will do, which is what it seems like all American corporations have done and are starting to learn, is he will initially cave to some of these demands and like go along with it, thinking like, here's that word we're going to use again, thinking appeasement will work.
Right.
And then about like 3 months out from the World Cup, when Trump starts demanding like even more ridiculous shit or like straight up cash, then he will start pushing back. But by then it will be too late. So yeah, I don't see why they wouldn't go along with this. I don't think they really care. They as long as they're making money, I don't think they really give a shit.
Well, I mean, the other like logistical problems are the matches are in Foxborough. They're at Gillette Stadium. They're not in the city of Boston. It's a totally different
Isn't
city.
Trump all buddy with Robert Kraft?
With Robert
well?
Kraft, yes.
Yeah,
I'm sure after that,
they go
Robert
to the
Kraft
same
was on the
massage
phone.
parlors. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
I'm sure Robert Kraft was on the phone immediately.
Yeah, like, hey, Donald, you know who is hosting that game, right?
Yeah. So that's another reason why I'm sure nothing will actually happen, at least in Boston. But who knows? He's floated the idea. He might try to use it as leverage somewhere else. But it is for me personally just another reason why I will follow the US team. I'll probably watch some matches, but I will not be as heavily invested in this World Cup like I have been in past World Cups, where I have watched practically every single match that has come through, especially through the group stages, because I love the group stages ideally. But right now, it doesn't give me any excitement thinking about the 2026 World Cup, which is something that if you asked me a year ago, I would have thought, if today's self said something to me, my year ago self, I'd be, you're out of your fucking mind. Like,
Yeah.
you've been looking for this for your whole life. And now it's just, it gets further and further pushed back into something I just have less and less interest in watching as an event.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know. It's tough too, because I was already pretty disillusioned with the U.S. men's national team. Like the whole fucking firing and then waiting 3 months and then rehiring Greg Berhalter, like that really kind of turned me off. And hiring Pochettino, like, I don't know. I was excited about it at the time, but it hasn't really like won me back. And then, of course, all this other nonsense that kind of makes you like ashamed to be an American. Is not helping win me over. And I also like, I don't know, this might belie my general like progressive outlook on the world, but like, I think it's kind of fair to say that this team like doesn't really feel like it necessarily represents the United States. Like a lot of these guys like have thick British accents. Like a lot of these guys have really never lived in the United States. They have like familial ties. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing necessarily, but it does like make it harder as like a fan to see that connection, right? And like the one player that I think most fans would look to and know off the top of their head, Christian Pulisic, is like all on board the fascism train. So it's a little bit hard to like connect with this team on a personal level for a variety of reasons. And then you put on top of it like just the absolute clown show that is the United States Soccer Federation and the absolute clown show that is the United States, period. So like it's just I don't know. I just don't like, it's hard for me to give a shit, and I it is going to bleed into the World Cup, and like you said, it's kind of like this. I've waited my whole life, like literally since I was born, was the last time the World Cup was here. And it's so disappointing, just like how little of a shit I give at this point.
Yeah, it is. It is very unfortunate because we know eventually all this will end and things will change, but it's frustrating in the meantime. But sticking in World Cup news, maybe on something a little bit more positive and something I was super happy to see, even though I'm not looking forward to the event in the summer, there are still storylines and things in terms of qualification for the World Cup that still excite me and interest me. And I love to see stories like Cape Verde.
Yes.
So if you haven't had a chance to see it, for anybody who's listening, you should go check out social media and the highlights. We now have, in terms of land mass, the smallest country ever to qualify for a World Cup. Series of small islands off the western coast of Africa. By population, I think the second smallest, only behind Iceland. But small
Iceland
country.
Will be tough to beat population wise. I think they're like
Iceland will be tough to beat in terms of population.
Yeah.
But had a great run, and they still have a match, and they've qualified. They're going to get through as top of their group or one of the best second place finishers. I mean, they could totally lose this. I think they play Cameroon or something in the last match, but what a great story for a country. And again, like, this is kind of the dichotomy for me, is I'm so disinterested in the actual event that's coming up, but at the same time thrilled to death for this country that made it. And just, those are the stories I love. That's what I love about the sport. And I just feel that kind of stuff is being taken away by big money and autocratic governments and everything, all the things that I love most dearly about the sport. So, and again, it's probably my focus to look more at the grassroots and lower league levels, because you can still find those stories. You can still find that excitement. You can still find that local connection that we're losing rapidly at the highest levels, even though the skill is amazing at the highest levels. But the atmosphere is getting lost.
Yeah, 100%. I am very excited for Cabo Verde. I think they officially changed their English language name a couple of years ago.
Okay.
But I guess you could call this devil's advocate. I'm going to view it, like, frame it more as like giving you an opportunity to explain some of the more other changes to this new World Cup and how maybe this has affected a country like Cabo Verde getting in to the World Cup. This isn't the first expanded World Cup, right? 46 teams.
Right.
So how, and I'm not like saying that to take anything away from this qualification. Like you said, they still have a game left. They'd have qualified for the 32 team World Cup playing like this. Like, to be clear, I'm not trying to take anything away from them. Do you know how those new slots have been allocated though? Like, I assume Africa's gotten a couple of them, but I'm genuinely asking, do you have any idea how the new slots were allocated?
Well, I mean, everybody got some more, clearly, because you've expanded by, 16 teams? We went from 32 to 48.
I thought we went to 46.
I think it was 48.
Well,
for this
I'll check, but continue.
Yeah. But even if we just look at CONCACAF, I mean, Canada, Mexico, and the US got automatic berths as hosts. So normally we send 3, and maybe a 4th goes for a playoff. So right now we do have the World Cup qualification going in CONCACAF, and we're looking at, I'm trying to remember, I think maybe another 3 teams that will be going in. So I think CONCACAF has something like 6 and maybe still a couple of playoffs. I'm not sure exactly, but it has opened it up to other teams who wouldn't normally qualify. But this brings up, again, a whole other issue. And we had briefly talked about this, I think, on a previous episode, but I would rather see the World Cup stay at 32. And if they want to expand, then do another tournament, a little World Cup, Mundialito.
Yeah. Or we could do like a Europa League World Cup, like second second tier World
Well,
Cup. Yeah,
well, just like we do in basketball. I don't know. Do they still do the NIT anymore? Because I'm not
they
following
absolutely do. They
college
have a
basketball.
third one
Yeah.
now, actually. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, like, and you could run it at the same time and run it in some of the off days and maybe even in the same country. I don't know, but, or a different country, but give other teams then a chance. Like, again, rather than expanding it out huge, then just do another tier one. Um, yeah. Anyway, that's frankly, I think you'd make a whole lot more money that way too. If you get to tournaments that you run and generate the interest and the hosting and kind of coordinate how they're going to work. Um, yeah, I don't know. Maybe you won't get quite as many eyeballs on one of the tournaments, since you have two, but between the two, you probably get a lot more eyeballs than you would just with the one. So anyway, those are
So
my thoughts. And I don't, if, did you find the
I think so.
qualifications?
It's surprisingly difficult, but you're correct. There are 48 teams. FIFA has a website, but it's wrapped up in all their mumbo jumbo. So as far as I can tell, AFC, which is Asia, gets 8 direct slots and 1 playoff slot.
Okay.
CAF, which is Africa, gets 9 direct slots, 1 playoff spot. CONCACAF, North America, obviously, gets 3 direct slots plus the 3 hosts, so 6 direct slots, you figure, 2 playoff
Right.
slots.
Okay.
CONMEBOL, South America, gets 6 direct slots, 1 playoff spot. OFC, so this is a big change, actually. They get 1 direct slot, which they haven't had. I mean, maybe they had. I don't think they've ever had a direct slot at the
Yeah,
World Cup finals.
I am not 100% certain, but I agree with you. I don't think they've ever had a direct slot.
So
They've
that's
always
cool.
had a
I mean,
playoff.
you figure that'll be New Zealand, but you never know. I think what it was back in like 2015, 16, Tahiti won the OFC Cup and was at the last Confederations Cup. Anyway, I'm nerding out here. It doesn't matter. So they get 1 playoff slot as well. So that'll be interesting to see who's the second best team in OFC, because I don't think we really ever get to answer that question these days. And then UEFA gets 16 direct slots and no playoff slots. And then there's, I don't know, 2 playoffs listed. But like I said, it's a little confusing. But so that's kind of a nice breakdown. It does seem like proportionally the confederations of Asia and Africa benefited the most, because I the CONMEBOL I think usually got 4 or 5 teams. Now they have 6 or 7. UEFA I think had 12 teams, or maybe it was like
Yeah, I think that's
10
right.
to 12. Now they have 16, so that's a 25% increase. But I'm pretty sure AFC at 8 guaranteed slots, that's like at least double. And then CAF, same thing, at 9 guaranteed slots, that's like at least double. So that's cool. I like that. It's good to know that those slots were allocated in that way, because I think that makes the World Cup more global.
Yes, I agree. And let's continue with World Cup qualifying. And you mentioned UEFA has all those extra spots. Did you also see in a good news kind of story, for I guess an underdog story, Faroe Islands, with their victory over the Czech Republic, 2-1. So they, still not sure that they're going to make it in. Still highly unlikely, but having a fantastic victory, and I don't know if you got to see it was great. Locker room celebration and everything. To have a tiny nation, not nation, territory of 55,000 people beating a relatively strong country like the Czech Republic.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess they would pretty easily smash Iceland's record for smallest population wise.
If they make it in, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, so they're in a 5-team group, so you figure that means 8 total games. It looks like they have 1 left. They're a point behind. I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to do another country name check on you here. Czechia. They officially changed their English language name a couple years ago.
Right.
Um,
Yes.
they're 1 point behind with I think 1 game to go, and that second place spot they're fighting for would only be a playoff slot. Their next game is against group leaders Croatia. Czechia's next game is against Gibraltar, who have no points after 6 games.
Yeah.
So it's a long shot, but you never know. There's a chance.
But you never, and those then for me make the fun
Yeah, 100%.
watches, right? Those are the ones you
Absolutely.
want to watch and see how they do. All right. Well, we'll keep an eye on what's going on with World Cup qualifying in general for some of these good underdog stories. But switching it back to the U.S., we did yesterday on Monday have the start of the NISA Pro Cup. Didn't get off to the best of starts. I don't know if you saw
I
this.
saw a
The
game was
opening
abandoned,
match,
right? Yeah.
the opening match abandoned at halftime. The team from Modesto, from what I understand, only had 9 players and were down 4-0. And I don't know the exact reasons, but the match was abandoned at halftime. Certainly not a great kickoff to the tournament for them. All the other games seem to go off without a hitch. So we'll kind of keep an eye on what's happening with the tournament, especially as it progresses to some kind of knockout round. Although I am interested to see this team from Modesto, I think plays Wednesday morning. So tomorrow morning for us as we record this. And I hope they're able to get a full complement of players. Don't know why they only had 9. I don't know if they only brought 9, if there were travel issues, because they're playing this tournament at a central location. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. And if I look at it one way, I feel bad for NISA. Like they just can't seem to not step on their own toes, because it's good to have extra soccer. But on the other hand, I look at it and my first thought was fucking NISA. Like,
I know. Well, I mean,
Jesus
I was
Christ, you
gonna
can't
say,
get your
like,
first game going.
that Jose Mourinho meme, like this is football heritage. Like this is NISA heritage. Like, the first game of the season getting canceled. I I guess I could say I feel bad for like the players because they are just right. They're trying to make a career for themselves. They're going to take what
Exactly.
contract they can get. I don't fault them for playing for these clubs despite the at this point like overly documented instability of NISA. I have a hard time feeling bad for NISA the league because it's like fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me, fool me like 12 times. I think we have to all stop and ask what we're doing here. And same thing for the owners. Like, I think if you have a club and you want to expand like into the pro game, I understand that. But I think if you are looking at what NISA has done over the last 5 years, basically since COVID, because I think pre-COVID they maybe had something going. It's hard to say. I went to a couple 1904 games, but it's hard to say. Since COVID, they have like every turn they've been wrong basically. And so like for you as an owner to look at that and say, yeah, that's what I want to like attach my club to for the foreseeable future. It just is like irresponsible at this point. So I have a hard time like having sympathy for the owners or the league. I do feel bad for the players. Like I said, I don't fault them for like chasing the contracts that they are offered. That like you can't, you're dealt the hand you're given. That's what it is. So I don't fault the players, but it's almost comical at this point. I wish they would. We've talked about this, all the time. I wish they would just lean harder into the whole NISA Nation thing they have going or had going. I thought that was really constructive, and just like not the absolute clown show that every NISA pro season seems to have been.
It's tough. You mentioned the owners, and I was going to make an ownership comment, which I'll probably save anyway for a different little point that we're going to have in a few minutes here. But the appeal to NISA, that idea is independent clubs and do it more like Europe. And I understand the allure because MLS locks you out unless you're part of the billionaire boys club over there. But USL, as high as I am at times on USL also is not like Europe. It's not where the clubs are independent and they have a share of the league moving forward. In fact, Kartik Krishnaiyer over at Beyond the 90 has, I think in this last week, put out a very good article about the ownership structure of USL and how it works. And it is a little different. Is it worse? I don't know. Maybe for the US because of, they're attaching to stadium and infrastructure builds, along with their teams. Maybe that's the way we need to go in this country. But there's still some other things I don't like about USL, the territorial rights and others. I mean, we've talked about that a lot. And so I get it from an ownership perspective of really trying to maintain and see that independent model move forward. And it's the only league right now that's trying. But as much as I appreciate that in theory, I don't see it. I don't see it working moving forward.
And
I think too many bridges have been burned along the way. I just don't see how it could possibly be successful after 2025. Like moving forward, how it could ever grow into a serious league.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And I think too that, like, sure, they can point to Europe and say we're trying to do what Europe does, but they're like, it's a huge leap to say we're going to do what Europe does and then like say we're going to try and do what Europe does, starting with the top. Like that.
Yeah.
And like what I mean by that is trying to do a national league from the get-go. Like if you really want to build a grassroots pro soccer movement, that's fine. Do like a third tier league. I don't have an issue with that, but like start it regionally. This idea that they're going to like have the Maryland Bobcats coming to San Diego like on a semi-regular basis, like that's just not financially profitable for anybody involved. Yeah. Now, if it was like Maryland's playing, in the like DMV area regional league for NISA, well then now that's a different question, and you can have a national tournament, absolutely, but like it would need to be more in the like League Two model for you that USL uses than the League One model. And I would say this for USL League One as well. I think they should move away from a national league model and more towards regionalized divisions, but whatever, that's another conversation. I just think like this idea that they've looked at Europe and are trying to emulate that, and I'm not saying that's what you're saying here, but I think they'd posit that argument is ridiculous because they're like skipping everything that built the pyramid they have in Europe.
Yeah.
Like literally like nearly 2 centuries of history of building these pyramids from the ground up. So it's just silly. I don't know. I just like, again, very little sympathy.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move into Open Cup news then, since we're staying with Cup tournaments. Before we get into the qualifying tournament and the match we went to, because I'm sure we have some things to talk about that, I do just want to give a shout out again to Nashville SC. For winning it, yes, the Open Cup, and I wish we could have a lower league team make that effort or not make the effort, actually have a success and a great run and get a championship one of these times, and maybe they will. But I was super thrilled to see Nashville as a community, a club, a team celebrate this Open Cup like it should be celebrated, with thousands of people showing up to celebrate the team and the trophy. And that's really what the Open Cup should be for everyone who wins it, instead of what we've had with some MLS teams in passing, a celebration on the field and the players are happy. But then as far as the ownership group or the club and something goes, it's almost an afterthought. We've moved on, it's done. I was really happy to see and I'll call them a club. I know it's MLS, but still a club really supporting this tournament in the way I think it should be supported by everyone. When you win a championship like this, you should celebrate it.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but Nashville is one of like 3 teams that were like, for all intents and purposes, promoted from USL, right? Along with Orlando and Cincinnati, where they were like existing USL clubs that were like rebranded as new MLS clubs.
Well, I mean,
I
guess go back further. I mean, there was a Nashville NPSL team.
So they go back, but there was a USL club existing prior, right? That was like related, or am I misremembering?
I'm trying to remember now. I'm trying to.
Anyway,
I think so for a little bit. Or yeah, I'd have to go back and double check because now I'm drawing a blank.
Well,
but yes,
the point
they have been a couple incarnations.
Is there's a historical understanding of like the wider soccer landscape amongst a core of, I'm assuming, a core of Nashville SC fans. So I think you kind of have that built-in like understanding there in a way that like, you know, a club that was born out of nothing into the MLS, excuse me, might not quite like have that link to the history of the U.S. Open Cup. But my head always goes back to, I remember when Loyal were competing in the Open Cup the very first time. They had the like, well, maybe it wasn't the first time. I don't know. One of the times they were in the Open Cup, they had their like, you know, club podcast with Jordan and blanking on the other guy's name, but
Darren.
That's right, Darren and Jordan. I remember they interviewed a guy who had been like the coach or sporting director for Charleston Battery in 2008 when they were the last club at that point, up and, you know, before Sacramento Republic went to the final, I think, 22, 23. He was like the coach or sporting director of the 2008 Charleston Battery team that, as a lower league club, were at the time the last lower league club to make it to the final of the U.S. Open Cup. And he said something that has always stuck with me, which is that, like, you can make the argument, and you would be right, that MLS is a higher level of play than any other soccer in the United States. And it is true that it is like the only Division I league. So like you can say that the winner of the MLS Cup is the best team in the United States, unless they're from Canada, I guess. But the best team in the United States, and you would, generally speaking, be correct about that. However, it is not true to say that they are the U.S. champion, because they didn't win a national tournament open to everybody. And his point was that, like, yes, the U.S. Open Cup maybe doesn't have the prestige that it once did or should have, but the winner of the U.S. Open Cup can say they are the USA soccer champion, because any team in America could have entered that tournament and you won it, which is not true of the MLS. And, like, again, it's a high level of play. I accept that. Like, that's not what I'm saying, but it is unique in that way. And Nashville celebrated it like they were U.S. champions. And that's how teams should celebrate it. So I agree. I love that they did that. I hope it's the first of many. And I mean, I would love if a lower league team could win it, because I think that would really give the tournament a kick up the ass. MLS would either finally like try to kill it for good, or they would have to take it more seriously. So
yeah, I agree. So I mean, we've seen the evolution. We'll see what MLS their participation is next year. Who knows? It evolves in weird ways, you know, from year to year. I really, you know, LAFC did not get a chance to defend their title this year. I really hope Nashville gets the chance to defend their title, but depending how MLS chooses to allocate their spots, they certainly this year allocated their spots generally by the teams that finished higher played in the Leagues Cup from the previous year, and the teams that finished lower played in the Open Cup. It wasn't exactly that way, but it was pretty darn close. So it'll be interesting to see how the allocations go, and if a team like Nashville gets the chance to defend their title, which they should.
It's very
all the
silly.
teams should be in there.
That,
right?
like, that's not built in. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, as a quick to circle back, Nashville FC was with the NPSL. It did evolve into USL team in 2016. Now, Nashville FC, I think, you know, there was an ownership change, and I don't know how much of that really, you know, retained the original Nashville FC into this new group. But then it was a USL team, and then it joined MLS in 2020. So that was that was the thing, for the history there for Nashville. All right, so I'm getting myself turned around with a couple different things on my screen and notes. Let's switch gears here to the preliminary or qualifying tournament round 2. You and I both had a chance to get out because we had 2 local matches here in San Diego. They both ended up being blowouts. But we attended the FC Balboa San Diego Enter match, and give me your general thoughts before we just talk about kind of the results and what's probably going to happen next here.
Yeah, I mean, I had a really good time. The game was a lot of fun, and I was pretty impressed by the level of play. And though it was what 7-1, I think was the final score. Though it was a total
Yeah,
blowout,
7-1.
I don't know that I think you could reasonably say that it was because one team was like technically like on a ability level way better than the other. I didn't get that sense. It was very much an organizational thing, right? I got the sense that SD Inter, the team that won, had been playing together for a long time, which you said to me was probably accurate because they take their stuff pretty seriously. And I also got the impression that the FC Balboa roster had like maybe this was the first time they were playing together. Like it felt so fucking disjointed and like just very little communication, a lot of hero ball. So anyway, that the point I'm trying to make is like I don't the level of play was like surprisingly good, but the level of coaching seemed to be either much better or maybe it's more fair to say much more long lived on one side than the other.
Yeah.
So I think that's more like what resulted in the blowout than any comparison of technical ability. Although I think it would be hard to say for the Balboa players just because they barely got the ball. But yeah, it was a really fun game. It was nice to go watch some live soccer again. And I got to be honest, I actually have the SD Inter schedule pulled up here. I'm going to try to get out to some games just because it's fun. It's fun watching live soccer and like not having to make like a financial commitment to do so. It's like I can just go to a game, have some fun, leave when it's over, and that's it.
Yeah, it was nice to get out, and I mean I just enjoyed getting out because I don't get out much anymore because of my health stuff. So it was nice to actually be able to get to a match, to hang out with you and Ken Garten was there as well. So it was nice to see Ken out with us, and we thought maybe a couple other people would be there, but they didn't make it. I heard there were a couple of people that went to the other match, and hopefully, well, let's talk about the other match quickly. That was a 9-0.
Oh wow!
At least by the score line, drubbing. I don't know again if it was a little similar to our match where maybe some newer players and maybe just tactically, it just wasn't quite the same. But the City SC team, the one that's based up there in Carlsbad, they were victorious over the Rebels team from the South Bay. So most likely, we're going to get the draw should happen. I'm from what I've heard most recently, sometime before the end of this week, and then they'll publish the results. But I'm guessing that City SC will play San Diego Inter in the next round, which is going to be in just a couple more weeks. It's going to be on November 1st or 2nd on that weekend. So we would like to try to make plans with more of you out there to show up for that match, since that will determine kind of our San Diego champion, who will then most likely jump in, or whoever that champion is will then play another team from either Orange County or Riverside County, most likely, for that spot into the 2026 Open Cup. So would love to see some more people show up. Like Dylan said, it was a lot of fun. I had a good time. Just as you said, watching live soccer, being out there, having fun. You just, being there with other people who enjoy doing that as well, especially people who like to support lower league soccer and especially this tournament, the US Open Cup. So I had a blast. I'm making plans already to be sure I can be available when that next match happens on the 1st or the 2nd.
1st or 2nd of November, you said? Okay.
Of November, yes.
I will keep that weekend in my notebook.
That will be round 3.
Do we have? I'm guessing we have no idea who will be hosting yet.
No, not till they do the draw, and I don't know that they do it like they do for the actual U.S. Open Cup in the later rounds. I don't think they do anything live. I think it's
no, I doubt it.
It's all done, very quickly, and figure out the matchups, and probably depends who can or can't host, or who has a field available that they can use. I bet for a lot of these teams it comes down to that. Our field's not available, but their field is, so they're going to host, right? So we'll see. It should be fun. I'm guessing it'll probably be at either Aviera Community Park up there in Carlsbad or at Mission Bay High School, because that's usually where SD Enter has their matches. So probably one of those two places. And then on the 1st or the 2nd of November, that's Saturday or Sunday in November. Okay, before we leave the qualifying tournament, there was a game that is actually a protest has been filed. I don't know if you saw this at all, but there's a match between, I gotta pull up my notes to make sure I get it correct here, but Lansdowne Yonkers defeated Doxa 2-1, although their very first goal that was scored went in through the outside of the side netting.
Yikes.
And it's caught on video. It's very obvious. The person who scored the goal knew that it went in around the outside, didn't even celebrate the goal, kind of sheepishly walked away and was like, we got the goal. Okay, I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to move along. And I have a lot of thoughts just in general about this, but yeah, so now there's a protest, and that goal was scored like in the 5th or 6th minute of the match. And, so Lansdowne got a goal they shouldn't have. They ended up winning 2-1. It was so early in the match. I imagine the protest will be upheld, and I imagine they're going to have to do a replay. So they're going to have to squeeze a replay in here quickly. And then, and I think both of these teams are in the Metropolitan League of the APSL, if I remember correctly. So it should be fairly easy. It's not like there's huge travel. So hopefully they can, we'll have to wait for US Soccer to rule on that. And I didn't see anything. Well, I haven't been online since this afternoon, so maybe something has come through. But I can't imagine that protest will not be upheld. And when you see the video, like as I haven't seen the video, but I heard reports that the coach for Doxa, I guess, walked through the opening. That's how bad the net was, I guess, not connected to the frame of the goal.
Worse than you'd assume.
In doing that, I think he got a yellow card and a red card, or it was a second yellow card or something. But just to make the point of like, what the hell? It's not like it was one clip broke or something and it just squeezed in just the wrong spot. It was like it wasn't connected at all. And like, did the refs even check it before the match? I mean, it was so bad that there's no way that game should have been allowed to move forward if that net was open like that. So I think there's also going to be some repercussions for the officials on this, because if that happened 5 minutes into the game, that's not something where a player fell into it and clips broke, or well, right. I'm guessing. Maybe it is. I have no idea. I shouldn't say that, but I'm guessing 5 minutes into the game, that sounds like somebody didn't do their job of checking the goals very well. So we'll be interested, and I know I may take a lot of flack for this, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think that Lansdowne team, somebody should have said something, because in this day, well, not that, get away with if you can get away with it. I don't want to imply that, but with cameras and everything else, like, you knew the ball went around the post. Like, all this could have been avoided. I'm sure if the player said, no, I didn't score the goal, and told the ref, no, it went around the outside of the post, because the linesman missed it, the ref missed it. The ref checked with the linesman. The linesman said it was a goal. Yeah, it just, there's a lot of potential problems there, but like, I just wish for something that is that flagrant and obvious. Like, it didn't just squeeze past the post like it was really hard to tell. It was, kind of almost a yard behind the post coming in from the side. It was the goalkeeper didn't even make much of an effort for the ball, because it was outside of the post, kind of curling over. Like, to me, that's where someone's got to step up and say, no, that was not a goal, and move on. And I know that's an unpopular opinion. People say, hey, if they didn't catch it, well, then, sucks to be them. But that's not a questionable thing. That is so egregiously bad. Somebody should have said something.
I mean, I guess my only defense of the team at large rather than the individual player would be. Did they know as well, or was it really just the guy who scored that was aware and didn't say anything?
It to me, from what I saw, it looked pretty obvious that almost
Okay.
everybody on the field except the officials knew what happened.
Fair enough.
So that to me is that's not how you win a game. Like sometimes there can be something that happens that's questionable. I don't know. I to me that's like the most blatant form of cheating. And that rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree, and not to be that guy, but our society seems to have decided that those sorts of things are not only acceptable but commendable.
Yeah, that's unfortunate because again, I think that would be, but that that gets back, if we go back to the opening of our podcast where we talked about the team walking off the field because of the homophobic slur. We had a time, especially when I was playing growing up, you just, like you'd be bullied or pressured into not ever saying anything. You take it like a man kind of thing. It's a man's game, Don't be whatever slur you want to throw in there. Don't be a pussy, right? It just I am glad to see more and more people speaking up for things. Now that's a little bit different because it's a slur directed at a person. But I also think for something like this, that's just I wouldn't want to win a game that way. What a cheap way to win.
Yeah.
And kind of say haha, I got away with it. And then it's going to stick with you. Like if you make it to the next round and everybody's gonna, I don't know. It rubs me the wrong way for something that's that blatant. But you're right. I think our society rewards, if you can get away with it, then don't say anything. That's the ref's job.
Unfortunately.
I wish people would have a little more integrity in a situation like that. Somebody within the group. Anyway, let's move on from that. We'll see what happens there with the Open Cup, but let's get some very, very quick lower league news. Now I'm going to mention 4 or 5 things very quickly here. Well, actually, we'll do one, and then I'll group a bunch of the USL stuff together, and you can tell me if you want to talk about any of them before we get into our main news here. But there was a new MLS Next Pro announcement, a new team from Long Island. So we were talking about our ownership before. I have a good picture of what the owners are like for NISA. They like that independence and right that's more in line with the rest of the world. I would like to kind of get in the headspace of an owner that wants to have an independent team in MLS Next Pro. I'd like to know, is it a certain type of person? Like who is it that I get Chattanooga? I think that's an outlying case, just a weird circumstance because of what happened with USL and so forth. But for everybody else, it's not something I would want to do for the podcast. Just for me, I'd want to know, I'd like to get in their headspace. What would make you want to be an owner of an independent club here? I feel like those people, I'm sure this is my own personal bias and stereotype, but I feel like they're not serious soccer people.
No, they're the business people.
Yeah. And I don't know them. I don't know. There may be very good reasons for why that works for them and their community. But it really seems to be a strange place I get NISA owners. I don't get independent MLS Next Pro owners. I just don't get that. Like why you'd want to be an independent team in that space.
Again, with the exception of, like Chattanooga.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, that's just more of a comment. In USL news, quickly, Florida announced 2 other markets, Space Coast Pro Soccer and Port St. Lucie. And then Fort Wayne Football Club, which is coming up from USL2. They were in League One the very first year, and then they dropped down to USL2, and they're coming back up into League One for next year. Well, they're going to rebrand. This is the team that DeMarcus Beasley is an owner of as well. So that will be coming up pretty soon. So it'll be interesting to see what that rebrand is. And just, I'm a little curious why they don't just keep Fort Wayne Football Club. But maybe they're trying to broaden their appeal outside of Fort Wayne. So we'll see what that branding is. And of course, the news about Bob Lilly, from the head coach from Pittsburgh, being put on administrative leave. So still waiting to hear if we get any news as to why he's been put on administrative leave, because usually you're not put on administrative leave for what happens on the field. You're usually just fired.
Generally not.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but not knowing, I haven't heard anything, from a reliable source of what's gone on there. And it seems like the league and the club are both, very tight-lipped right now. So very curious situation for a coach who's been around for a long time and been very successful, and has been good, at least as a coach on the field for Pittsburgh. I think this came as a shock to a lot of people, and everybody's just waiting to see what the administrative leave thing is for. So I threw out a bunch of things. Are any of those you want to talk about, or ready to just kind of move on?
No, I think I'm ready to just kind of, get into it. Bob Lilly, I don't know. I don't have thoughts. Administrative leave usually means they did something gross, though. So that's really all I have to say about it.
Yeah, unfortunately. I mean, I hate that if it's warranted, which I don't know why it wouldn't be, but I'm glad a team is stepping up and doing something about it, instead of what we have historically happened in sports, with coaches just being quietly dismissed and going somewhere else and doing the same, I'll say, bad behavior. I don't know that this is a situation with Bob Lilly. I want to be very clear about that. But if there is something there, I'm glad a team is stepping up to do something about it. So really have no idea. Like, everybody just seems to be waiting to hear, if they hear anything, what happens from that. Or, if he comes back, it's a temporary thing for some reason. But I also think I get a team not wanting to say anything, but in this day and age, especially when you make that kind of terse announcement and say administrative leave and don't say anything else, people's minds start to wander, and I think they tend to wander towards the worst end of what things could be. So I hope we get some news about that sometime soon.
Yeah, agreed.
Anyway, the last thing for USL, I really this year have, I want to say fallen in love, but have enjoyed watching League One matches a lot. We've talked about it previously on this podcast, and Alex Ashton from Beyond the 90 has a good article. You should go check it out if you're interested at all, or even if you haven't followed League One and you're interested, as we're getting into the last 2 weeks and getting ready for playoff scenarios and others, and what games you might want to come in and check out as we get towards the playoffs here. But good article of where everybody is, and it's nice with these 14 teams. I really like this 14 team kind of league. I don't want USL League One to stay there. I agree with you. It should be regionalized, but I kind of like this number of 14 and the combinations and going into playoffs. So I'm having fun coming into this playoff season. I think more excited about what's happening in League One than I am in the USL Championship.
Yeah, fair enough. And I mean, League One has been kind of a hotbed of growth as well. So it's nice to, or like you said, it is kind of more interesting sometimes.
All right, and 2 quick San Diego news before we get into our stuff about Australia. Just saw Landon Donovan's book you can pre-order. I guess it's coming out in the spring. So we'll claim him as one of our own since he lives here now and coach for the Loyal and everything else in terms of a San Diegan. So just floating that news out there for anybody who might be interested in his, I believe it's listed as a memoir. And then again, I feel like a broken record. I want to give another shout out to the Sirens for the new shirt that they put out. Let me get this right here with my notes. They got a new t-shirt that they're selling to raise awareness for migrant justice. And a portion of the proceeds are going to Al Otro Lado, sorry. It's a local group that provides holistic legal and humanitarian support to refugees, deportees, and other migrants. And once again, the Sirens continue to do an amazing job connecting with the local community. And I'd like to see some of our other groups do some similar things out there. But again, another big shout out to the Sirens.
Yeah, definitely. They've always been really good about that kind of stuff. So.
Okay, let's finally here get into our news about Australia, or the Australian League system. So we mentioned in the opening a little bit why we're doing Australia with all the stuff that's going on right now, especially with their new championship on the men's side, kicking off their new D2 National League last weekend, along with the restart of the A-League men and the A-League women. But also, as we said in the beginning, because Australia is almost identical, as Dylan mentioned, in size to the continental United States. You know, about the same distance east to west. It has similar distances north to south. Obviously, the shape is a little bit different, but I mean, if you do one of those things where you go on the internet and do an overlay of Australia over the continental United States, I mean, they overlap nicely with each other. The difference, though, the huge difference is in terms of population and where that population is. The United States, 330 million people in terms of population. Australia, do you have, without looking it up, do you have any idea, Dylan? I know what it is.
I would guess like 80 to 100 million, probably.
27 million.
Wow, that's
it was
way
much
lower,
smaller than I thought when I looked it up. Yeah, and you know, as Dylan mentioned, beginning with the outback, and you look towards the center of Australia, not very populated at all. So 87% of the population in Australia lives within 50 kilometers of the coast. And compare that to the United States, 40 to 50% of our population lives near the coast. So people are really aligned around coastal areas, but not just all around the coast, because 90% of the population live in urban centers. So it's really concentrated in a handful of cities dotted around the coast, around Australia. There's huge amounts of open space in Australia. So that is a significant challenge in trying to create some kind of national league and national footprint in terms of soccer or a pyramid that would work with any kind of depth as well. So, and then one last thing in terms of Australia. In Southeast Australia, you have your big population centers, and they're in New South Wales and Victoria, right? You have Sydney in New South Wales and the Australian Capital Territory, Canberra. And then in Victoria, you have Melbourne, right, as your big cities. So between those areas, or really between those two states, New South Wales and Victoria, you have 57% of the entire population of Australia live in there. And those two states make up less than 15% of the total land. And really, most of that land people don't live in. They're really concentrated in those city center areas. So if you look at any of their sports, they're heavily concentrated, a lot of teams in the Sydney area and in the Melbourne area. And then you get your outlying Perth and Adelaide and Brisbane team. You know, you get your teams from some other areas, but you really get a heavier concentration in Melbourne, Sydney, that stretch there in southeastern Australia. So we're kind of looking at Australia because of the size. And also, again, it's another country where they have their own football, the AFL, right? Like we have the NFL that dominates a lot of the sport conversation and attendance. So they're similar to us in that way, where soccer is not the top sport, but they are also trying through their federation and other means to be competitive on the world stage in terms of global football. So we have some similarities there, but they are actively working as a country to try to institute a better pyramid and promotion relegation in order to better compete with the rest of the world. Whereas, we have one league that's trying to do it, rather than a coordinated effort from top to bottom. So, any comments from you, Dylan, before we're going to jump in and take a look at where are they right now in 2025? But before we do that, do you have anything you want to add or ask about?
No, just I don't know too much about the Australian system, but I know that to this point the A League has been run more like the MLS than like a European.
Yes. Yeah. And that is, so we'll see as we go through this some similarities to where we are now, but they are actively trying to bridge some of those. So Australia has a pyramid. It's defined in several ways. It's not completely integrated with promotion relegation, as Dylan mentioned. Especially there is no promotion into or relegation out of the A League at the moment, and probably won't happen in the very, very near future. But they are working on building those structures to build up that base underneath their two top leagues. So they do have a pyramid structure. It is defined in some way. They have a tournament, like we have the Open Cup, they have the Australia Cup. It is open to teams from levels 1 through 9 of the pyramid. And I have seen I think it was the Australian Capital Territory, that it goes down, I think, to tier 13 in the pyramid. So if you're somewhere, however they define it, on levels 1 through 9 of the pyramid, you can then participate in their version of the Open Cup. The women, though, that's only for the men. The women do not have, just like we don't, for our women either here in this country, do not have their own version of the Australia Cup. There was plans to start one in 2024, but it never materialized. I'm not really sure where they are right now, but hopefully that will get started in some way. But at the very top of the pyramid, you have the A-League. And you have the A-League men and the A-League women. So both top divisions, closed leagues at the very top, no promotion relegation. Below that, on the men's side, you have the brand new Australian Championship, which just started last weekend, their first games. We'll talk about how that works here in just a second, because it's not a true league. Right now, it's more of a tournament as they're kind of bridging their way into creating a league. Then below that, on both the men's and women's side, they have what is still considered their Division 2, but they're regionalized leagues, basically by each state. But they're like Northwest or New South Wales is split up into New South Wales and then North New South Wales, because there was a time a little ways back when the Sydney clubs kind of broke away and did their own thing. But so it's not exactly for each state, but it basically covers the states and territories. Although the Capital Territory, Canberra, there is its own federation, has its own tournaments, and that's where you have the deepest, going down in the pyramid to like level 13. So they have a lot of soccer and organized soccer with promotion relegation through many of the tiers. It's up to each state. Underneath the NPL, which is their National Premier League. So it's kind of like we did Canada, very recently. Canada has their League One Canada, and in each territory, they have a league right there at the top that is part of League One Canada. They did the same thing in Australia. They have the National Premier League. So at the top level in each state is the National Premier League of Victoria or the National Premier League of New South Wales. And then that sits at the top of the state or territory. And then you have the different state leagues that would go below that. We did say in the Australia Capital Territory, it does go down to tier 13, but they only do promotion and relegation through the top 6 tiers. From tier 7 below, they have leagues. They're identified as different tiers, but at the moment, there's no promotion relegation there. And then you can get down to your individual district leagues in some of your larger states that have a lot more participation in terms of clubs and soccer. So that's the current structure. We'll do a little background here in a second, but before we get to that, Dylan, any questions or comments?
No, I'm just looking through, some of the clubs here, and I actually do see some historic clubs. So it's, it'll be cool if they can unify this pyramid somehow, and some of these clubs maybe have a path back to the top that they otherwise don't have.
Right. And if we go look at some of the background, you have the NSL and then the WNSL, which was their National Soccer League. On the men's side, that went from 1977 to 2004. Now, there was soccer that happened before this. We're just picking up here for our conversation. So the National Soccer League was an attempt to make a more national footprint there. So again, that went from 1977 to 2004, and then the WNSL, the Women's National Soccer League, went from 96 to 2004. Then in 2004 was switched over for the A-League. So the A-League actually started in 2005. And the A-League was just men's initially. The few years later, they created a new league for the women. They called it the W League at the time. That was in 2008. It eventually got rebranded as A-League Women, or in 2021, it's all under the A-League. So you had A-League Men and you have A-League Women. So they have it, which I like a lot better. I like, how do I want to say this? I really am getting tired of like NBA, WNBA. Like we always have to put the W in front of one of them as the qualifier, and we just assume it's men on the other side. I like that the U.S. for so many years now has done USMNT and USWNT. Right? That we don't like reserve an abbreviated version just for one gender.
They've done that for a long time in college basketball as well, to be fair.
Yes,
NCAA,
basketball
M, and W.
especially.
Yeah.
So it's nice that they've done that. So the A-League did that in 2021. It's all the A-League, and you have A-League men, you have A-League women. In 2010, just like they did in Canada around the same time, they did a national competition review by Football Australia, which is their national body. And they were looking like, how do we make our pyramids better? Like, how do we improve soccer so we can compete better on a global stage, especially improve things on the men's side, but also kind of fill in some of the gaps on the women's side. So it's not just really kind of having a top tier and not much below it. And the recommendation was to go with these regionalized leagues, just like they did in Canada, right? So regionalized leagues, and they rebranded as the National Premier League. So that started officially in 2013. So again, start on the men's side first. On the women's side, or the WNPL, started 2014. Not all the states jumped in right away. And still on the women's side, I think there's only about 6 or 7 states that have kind of bought into the system with women's teams. And again, they're your states with larger population centers. On the men's side, I think you have all the states and territories involved. And for the last few years, they've been working on trying to create this second division national league to sit underneath the A-League. Ideally, to be Well, I guess it depends who you ask. If you ask some people, ideally to sit below the A League and be that link and be able to get promotion and relegation going. I think if you ask other people, just like in this country, if you're more on the A League side, there are people who are like, no, we should stay closed leagues. I don't ever want my team to go down, or owners not wanting to support that. So where this eventually ends up, I don't know. But they are trying to build that system up underneath the A League so there is a solid structure of promotion relegation leading up. And I'm guessing to put pressure to open it up with the top division and have promotion relegation. So this new Australian Championship that started last weekend, they spent years vetting clubs. Like, you can go, there's all these stories out there, and you look on Wikipedia, but there's a bunch of clubs, I think like 50 some initially, that petitioned to be part of this second league, this bigger national footprint league. They went through a couple rounds, they vetted some. It seems like they have 8 teams that, for whatever their vetting process was, were vetted. Like they were able to do it. And it sounds like they didn't want to run a league, from what I can best gather, with just those 8 teams. So what they did for this year is the 8 teams that got vetted, they became what they call foundation clubs. They automatically got granted into the championship. And then they just finished the NPL season on the men's side, and they took all the winners. Now in Australia, they identify, like we do it with Shield winner, they call it a premier. If you win the table at the end of the season, you're the premier, right? You win the premier trophy. If you win the postseason playoff, you're the champion. So that's how they identify the premier or the champion, or maybe you were both, you did the double. So what they did is they took the premiers of the different states from this last season, which just ended a couple weeks back. So they're continuing on almost like a postseason tournament around the same time that the A League now is starting up. So you got your 8 foundation clubs and your 8 premiers, and they're doing a little World Cup style tournament as a start for a Division II league in Australia, which I think it's an interesting concept, and interesting the way they've gone about it, because clearly whoever is making some of these decisions, which they've created I don't know if it's an LLC exactly or what, but to manage this championship league. And some people clearly felt they weren't ready to go with enough teams. And this kind of gives them the bridge. We have some teams identified. We have some teams that won this year that would technically be promoted up if we were doing promotion relegation. So let's do a little World Cup style tournament and have them play and decide a champion, and I'm guessing see where we are in a year or so. If maybe they get more clubs who meet the vetting requirements to actually be up there to start this national footprint Division II league, which I guess if they're able to do that, it probably pushes, officially the NPL down to Division III. But that's where they are right now. They're in the process of trying to make this happen. And they've spent a good 10 to 15 years trying to work through the process of strengthening their state leagues up into a champion at the top of these state leagues, and then trying to develop up a national footprint above that. So comments, Dylan, before we dive into a couple of things that I thought were highlights of this for me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you'll know what I'm going to say is that it's amazing what can happen when your federation actually gives a shit about the domestic leagues beyond the top one. So,
yes, and it is, and they, the A League is run separately, like Major League Soccer is run separately from the federation, but the federation does seem to be active in helping shape what happens below it. So there is a national structure, which is, as Dylan just pointed out, something we clearly don't have. A national federation trying to help shape or mediate how this could look in our country. We clearly have enough teams. Like, it could be done, but for us, but we'll see. All right. For me, a couple of highlights in all of this. One, I think we've seen this in almost every place we've looked at, but these countries that take the idea of instituting promotion relegations seriously, especially people who've started since maybe the 80s or 90s on to try to do something, they are less concerned about having a national footprint than they are taking the existing structures they have regionally and making strong vertical depth in those regions before they really start broadening out to a national footprint, especially in countries that are very large. And I think that's something, well, I mean, we can only talk about USL, I guess, right now, but I hope USL, as they expand, I think that they look at that, or they make partners with regional leagues to help work on something that could feed in directly to whatever USL is doing. Because I think that's the biggest mistake we make in this country is we seem to consistently try to do this big, wide national footprint all the time, even with if it's just 8 teams, instead of we have great concentrations of soccer in these pockets. Let's develop a good vertical structure here that we can then model and use in other places to build up, keep building up from these places to get a stronger level up above.
Well, and that's where the federation comes in, right? Is
exactly
the way the U.S. is set up, it is almost necessarily the case that leagues are fighting each other rather than working
exactly
together,
right. So. And if we didn't have leagues fighting each other and U.S. soccer, or even if U.S. soccer got all these people to sit down at the table and say, UPSL, you take the Southwest, somebody else, you take this, like just you manage this part and just focus on this area, and we'll set, almost like we do the professional league standards, we'll set like these are benchmarks and guides for these different tiers, and you make it fit or work however it is in your region. I mean, I love looking at things like the APSL over on the East Coast, which that sits atop of several other, state and regional leagues. And even those go down several tiers. So you have this nice structure put in place in several areas around this country. Southern California, I look at, we have so many teams, like so many teams in Southern California among all the different leagues. If there was just some structure, if Cal South, which is our state association, could help organize and manage this and start getting people together in some levels, we could have an amazing multi-tiered structure of soccer. And then if you're one of the best teams out of Cal South, you can move into some kind of regional league or something, or interstate league if it's just California, Nevada, and Arizona or something. You set a league above them, but it's frustrating, as you said. We don't have the organization, but that's the other thing. Is what I consistently see when we go through these is the regional, state, county, whatever smaller organizations of federations, they take an active part in helping to build and organize this, where we leave it up to private companies.
Right. And, funny how that works out. The private companies are only chasing the money. So.
Well, right. And that's, I have 2 last comments, and that gets to an unfortunate piece with the A-League women. Is one of the teams, I don't know if, I can't remember if Australia does a licensing like other countries, but they basically force-folded one of the teams because it was having liquidation problems and so forth. So the league that was going to go in with 12 teams this year all of a sudden is as we're getting ready to start in a couple of weeks, is down to 11 teams. And this is what happens also, I think, when you don't have the strong base underneath. You are just relying on owners at the top who really want to maximize their investment instead of, using a phrase like growing the game, making the game better all the way through Australia and being stewards as opposed to, what can I get out of this as an owner? So that's a disappointing piece of news for Australia coming in to the start of the season, especially, I'm wearing the shirt right now. The last World Cup was hosted by Australia and New Zealand. And they've gone from a high just a few years ago of everybody in love with the sport to having some financial troubles, which now people are questioning the validity of, how successful either women's sports can be or soccer can be in Australia. So that's an unfortunate problem right now, but we see the same things in this country, especially with private closed leagues. But my last thing I want to bring up, which I found super intriguing when I was diving into the playoff structures, like how do you get well, there's promotions are based on how you finish in your league, whether you are premier or not, you get promoted. But then they still do their playoffs in a lot of leagues also. And in one of the leagues, and I think it was in New South Wales, and it might be the National Premier League of New South Wales, they had 5 teams that made it to the playoffs. It's a weird semi-double elimination playoff thing that I found very intriguing. On paper, I found it interesting. I don't know if I'd like it if it actually happened, but so it works like this. You have your top 5 seeds. Your top seed automatically goes to what they call the major semifinal. So they have a major semifinal and a minor semifinal, and then they have your finals. And then there's some other kind of play-in games, but those are your anchor points. So the top seed goes to the major semifinal. Seeds 2 and 3, they play off a match, and whoever wins that goes and plays in the major semifinal against the top seed because they got moved over there automatically. Seeds 4 and 5, they play off against each other, and the winner of that one plays the loser of that match between 2 and 3, and that they play in the minor semifinal. So what ends up happening as you kind of go through these games is your top 3 seeds, they all get into this with a double elimination possibility, and seeds 4 and 5, as soon as they lose, they're out. So whoever wins the major semifinal goes straight to the final, but the loser can still do a play-in game to get into the final because they'll play the winner of the minor semifinal to figure out who is the other opponent. One of the things I liked about this is, when you do playoffs and you give your top seed a bye, we see so many times the seeds that get a bye because they don't play and the other team has played and they have a victory and they move on. They have the momentum and the top seed doesn't always fare well. Kind of gives you that cushion that if you were to lose, you still have another chance to play and keep going based on your seed.
So it's double elimination, almost, sort of.
It was double elimination for the top 3 seeds, the way it works out. But if you're 4 or 5, it's single elimination. And I keep rolling it through in my brain, trying to think through whether I'd like this or not. There's aspects I like about it. And, it gives several games. It's just your top 5 seeds, but I think they only had like 12 teams in the league. So you're still talking, not quite half, but close to half being in there. And not every league did a playoff structure like this. Most of them did your traditional kind of, if there's 6 teams, you have 1 and 2 get a bye, and then 3 plays 6, 4 plays 5, and you move on like normal. But this was one I stumbled across. It was different, and I really had to kind of map it out to make sure I was understanding what was going on. But I found it interesting. But they love their recognizing the premier, whoever wins the league season, and it's very important to them, like I think to a lot of people in the US, to have a postseason championship match. So you have those 2 trophies. You're the premier or you're the champion. That's how they distinguish between the 2.
Fair enough. I like it.
Yeah. I do like that also, really having that distinction. And we use the term shield, so I just don't think we give, I don't think we give enough weight to the shield. I think we should give more, but I also think we don't give enough weight to the shield because we don't play a balanced schedule. And it's really hard when you don't play a balanced schedule to give significant weight to the shield.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that kind of wraps up where we are. It'll be interesting again, like some of these countries that are newer to getting into this, where Australia is in 5 years with promotion relegation. And like we saw when we did our episode on Pro-Rel in Japan, if you've got a vision and you've got good structure, you can make tremendous strides in 5 to 10 years if it's all laid out, for what you want to do. So
yeah, well,
be interested to see how it plays out, and especially interesting large country with all those pockets of population areas.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're going a little long here. We're going to have to wrap this up. Dylan, thank you for everything here. What are your plans coming up for soccer this week, or anything for this week?
Well, I'll actually be in Florida this weekend for the first time ever, so that'll be interesting. I don't know. I guess I could look up like Miami Spurs or something, but I don't know if I'll be able to make that work. So we'll see. I don't think I have any real soccer related plans this weekend.
I as well don't have any. Well, I'm sure I'll watch some soccer, but and I'm going to switch gears out of soccer mode for a second to try to encourage people. Like, my whole focus this weekend is the No Kings marches and rallies. And I would strongly encourage anyone to find an event near you, a local event, and get out there. If we want to see changes in what is going on in our country, and I want to see it for all kinds of reasons, but I absolutely want to see it in terms of soccer and the effect that's happening on football. But really strongly encourage it. Find a local one. We have, I don't know how many in San Diego County. There's a huge one happening downtown at the waterfront. In nearly every community, there's something going on this Saturday. Find one, get out there, and show your support that we do not allow kings and tyrants and authoritarian regimes in this country. So I will be doing that. Is going to be the main focus of my weekend. Everything else is being put aside because I think it is that important to be out there. So that's my big push, and then I'll get back into the more of the soccer stuff hopefully next week.
Yeah, very good. I don't think I'll be able to get to one while I'm in Florida, unfortunately, but I would be if I was here. So good on you.
Now, I just, not to say that you can't find one, but I'm also personally won't be in my normal local area, and I've already made sure I found where the closest one's going to be where I am on Saturday, and to make sure to get out there and lend support. All right. As always, if you have a question or comment about tonight's show, please drop us a note. You can do it here on our YouTube channel. You can leave a comment. You can send us a message over at Blue Sky. You can reach us at soccershorts@bigpinedigital.com. If you're listening to the app, you can send us a text using the Send Us a Text link, which should be at the top of the episode description. We always welcome your comments and your feedback and your ideas for suggestions for different topics for us to cover on the show. But always, if you can make it, we usually record live on Tuesdays at 6 o'clock Pacific time. Come and join us and participate in the chat as we do our live stream. All right, Dylan, any final comments before we head on out?
I was just informed by my lovely partner Gabby, who just walked behind me, that tonight is the Anaheim Ducks home opener. So the NHL season's getting rolling. So to any of our hockey fans, hockey is a sport that it's not my, I don't know. I spent a lot of years working in an ice rink, so it's not my favorite sport. I've been exposed to it a lot. It's not my thing. That said, I have a lot of respect for it because of the history, tradition, and the way it's focused on communities. I think hockey is really cool, and the way they do the like, if the point system with the overtime losses, like you get a point for an overtime loss, 2 points for an overtime win, 2 points for a win. I think if you're gonna do like, if you must have a winner, that's the way to do it, right? Acknowledge you didn't lose in regular time. So anyway, I guess the hockey season's getting underway. I did kind of know that, but it was just brought to my attention. So if you're a hockey fan, I'm happy hockey season.
Yeah, get out there, support all your sports, support any of your local sports, soccer or otherwise. Get out there and be part of the community. All right, everyone, thank you again for joining us on another episode of Local Grassroots Stories. And we will see everyone next week. Good night.